Hi, I'm Heidi Pickett, Chief of Staff and SVP of Strategic Initiatives with a tie, and I am excited to be joined by Morgan Krupetsky, Head of Institutions and Capital Markets, and Ed Chang, Head of Gaming, both from Avalanche, for our fifth edition of the Quarterly State of Avalanche call. So we're going to cover several topics around Avalanche, the broader ecosystem, some verticals, launches, partnerships, initiatives over the last quarter, and a little preview into what's to come for the rest of the year. Given this is our fifth edition, we are going to assume that our audience has a baseline awareness of the Avalanche blockchain and its key differentiators. But if not, please feel free to catch replays of our past quarterly calls or reach out to Morgan or Ed to learn more. And finally, a note that the information contained in this webinar is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as investment advice. Okay, with that, let's get started. So certainly an exciting kickoff to 2024. You had one of your largest upgrades to the Avalanche blockchain, the Durango upgrade. I think it'd be great to really kick it off, Morgan, with, what is this, what is included, and why is it so important?
Sure. And Heidi, thank you again for having us. We really enjoy these webinars. And personally, I'm very excited also to have Ed join us today. There's a lot of stuff kind of going on in the ecosystem and in particular on the gaming side. So definitely we'll hear from him kind of later in the webinar. But from a platform perspective, yes, you're right. The Durango upgrade, which went live last month, was definitely exciting, I think, for all of us and for the Avalanche community writ large. Without going into kind of like the technical details and really talking about like the so what, I think there's a lot of things that were included in that upgrade overall. It at a high level addressed some kind of common requests from developers to improve the developer experience with things like adding P-chain native transfers, enabling subnet ownership transfers, and really maintaining smart contract capability with Ethereum by supporting the Ethereum Shanghai upgrade and so on. But I think the big highlight of the Durango upgrade for the network overall was really the launch of Teleporter. This is Avalanche's cross subnet communication protocol, really leveraging what we introduced in 2 Decembers ago, called Avalanche Warp Messaging. And Teleporter is really the Avalanche network's intra-network interoperability protocol or interoperability solution that essentially lets all of the chains or subnets within the Avalanche network communicate with each other, not just subnet to subnet, but importantly C-chain, which is part of our primary network, to subnet and vice versa communication, and really kind of creates this unified network of networks that we always talk about when we talk about like what is Avalanche. Importantly, this preserves the autonomy and customization of each individual subnet, but at the same time ensures really a streamlined and interconnected operational and liquidity environment for whether it's the gaming companies building on Avalanche, the DeFi protocols, the financial services institutions, whatever it is. Importantly, from a capabilities perspective, the interoperability protocol effectively eliminates the need for third-party bridges or third-party trust assumptions, which I think resonates with a lot of our partners. I know I can speak from my perspective, definitely for financial services institutions, as it really just relies on the validator sets of the respective chain or chains that are involved in that transaction. So from a financial services perspective, most financial services institutions, especially banks, have been interested in building and managing their own kind of known and trusted validator sets and their own subnets. This allows them to communicate with each other. Like, what does that mean? What are some examples? They can send trade RFQs, they can send assets, they can send trade confirmations, whatever they need to kind of, again, transfer between the two of them, only relying on their two and known validator sets. And then lastly, and importantly, and Ed, I'm sure you can kind of chime in here as well, the fact that the team kind of focused on cultivating this liquidity hub with the C-chain, right? And ensuring that there were all the kind of key important infrastructure integrations put in place, whether it's custodial, data and Oracle feeds, stable tokens, other types of liquidity, means that when you as a company or a group of companies build on a subnet, you don't have to kind of bootstrap your network from scratch. You don't have to focus on building up all the native integrations and infrastructure from scratch. You can actually leverage the liquidity hub and the C chain, whether it's, again, via stable coins or Oracle feeds or whatever that is, in building up your own kind of subnet environment using Teleporter. So there's a lot of kind of applications, which we're really excited to finally like showcase and operationalize. And Ed, I'm sure there is some things that you could highlight also from like a gaming perspective in terms of why different companies might be interested in Teleporter as well.
Yeah, thanks, Morgan. I think the key piece here is conceptually, a lot of the times when we were talking to projects about deploying a subnet, it did feel maybe a little bit independent, right? Oh, there's the C chain, there's the subnet. I have to make some hard trade-offs. But I think with Teleporter, it effectively makes that a no-brainer, which we always knew, right? Because even third-party bridges were totally fine for a lot of our solutions. But right now with Teleporter, for a lot of our games are excited and actively kind of exploring and testing it, because you think about it, you've got assets, whether it's tokens or their NFTs sitting on your subnet. You can effectively build a one-click deployment where on the back end there's liquidity on another chain, the C chain somewhere else, teleports it over, swaps it, brings the assets back in all seamlessly, right? So there's that, and then of course the composable nature itself of a lot of these assets, where we've got a very thriving gaming ecosystem. They all want to collaborate with each other, do partnerships, and this just makes it really easy. So I think that's probably like the first step of what can be actually built and unlocked, and there's going to be a lot of other cool use cases that we probably haven't even thought of yet. So very exciting times for this kind of chain of chains type thesis.
Excellent. Yeah, it sounds like we're going to be certainly talking about this again in future calls. So excited to see how this plays out. Just in terms of like other developments. So Emin Gunsir, your CEO of Avalabs, I guess he released a technical roadmap for Avalanche for the very first time. What are you most excited about? What are some of the key developments, particularly those that are going to distinguish Avalanche from other blockchains?
Yeah, I think the first piece that's pretty interesting is I think we've already done a really good job of kind of differentiating ourselves amongst other blockchains, in the sense that subnets were discussed in kind of the first Avalanche white paper, and I think for a long time I felt like we were out in market selling subnets. It wasn't the easiest thing, and other chains were saying like, who wants to build a subnet? And you look now, I feel like every week there's a new announcement from a chain that is introducing their own version of an app chain, right? And I think subnets, like the value prop is very clear in the sense that it feels like other chains may be trying to cram that into a box. It's like, let's work backwards into the net effect of a subnet, but there are a lot of kind of technical trade-offs. But this roadmap, I think, shows just how far ahead we are, and then what's to come, right? So I think there's probably kind of three main areas that we look at in terms of how we even widen that gap. So the first is kind of decoupling subnets from the primary network. So right now, there is some friction in terms of running your own validator, right? In the sense where you're not only there's a certain token requirement, but there's also, you need to validate kind of the primary network itself, right? So working on being able to lower that requirement. I think more options to design different staking requirements and rewards around subnets. What makes it really interesting is because we've got, I think, 1,400 plus validators in our ecosystem. Allowing them to opt in and share in the economic upside is really interesting there. And then, of course, subnet-driven validator sets that give the subnet full control over that staking set. So right now, most of these are permissioned, but being able to offer this permissionless, right, where anybody can opt in if they meet certain requirements. And then with Teleporter, just expanding the range of customization that you can offer. You send a warm message, anyone can still verify that message, regardless of the staking set. So I think we're really excited about lowering the requirements to run a validator and validate subnets. The second piece is kind of enabling high throughput VMs. We are known as an EVM chain. However, we aren't just an EVM chain, which makes us, there's a lot of options here, right? So we've been working on Bricks, which we were kind of talking about. It's our own custom VM called Hyper SDK. It's powered by the Hyper SDK. And so we think that this is one of the most interesting features coming down the pipe. One reason is there's a lot of gaming subnets, a lot of institutional, a lot of other subnets that anticipate the scale required that they're going to hit to be way beyond the EVM, which we know there's there's just inherent blocks there. But our North Star is to be able to hit 100K TPS per chain in a sustainable way. So that's really exciting. A lot more to come there. And then the last piece is just consensus improvements. I think we pride ourselves on already having, the fastest kind of time to finality, which is sub-second. We want to get that even lower to below 500 milliseconds. So very ambitious, but if there's an engineering team that can do that, it's the one here. So we're really excited.
And I thought it was really interesting. You mentioned, this has always been like the vision from the beginning. And I remember when I first joined, that was when we first started kind of realizing the need for subnets and really pushing this app chain kind of construct forward. And people were like, you're crazy. Like, why would you need an application specific chain? And to your point, now we've seen different iterations of L2s and different kind of offerings from different companies with their own application specific chains. But because, how did you phrase it? Like everyone's kind of cramming it into a box. Because of that, now they're realizing like the inherent issues with, now they're not interoperable, or now that you can't share and leverage kind of comparable liquidity. And so it seems like, because we had this vision from the beginning, we always kind of anticipated you would need these application specific chains. You need them to be sovereign and customizable, but importantly, you need them to be interoperable and to be able to kind of share liquidity in that respect. So I think that's a good point that I wanted to kind of emphasize. And then in addition to that, the idea of really ensuring like subnet sovereignty via potentially like removing this requirement of having to stake 2,000 bucks per subnet validator. I think the motivation there, Heidi, was really to kind of do two things. One, because we kept hearing feedback in terms of, especially for a startup, the costs can become prohibitively expensive for building and spinning up your own subnet because of that requirement. So we never want the cost to be like a prohibitive factor from someone wanting to spin up their own subnet. So that was kind of one big unlock. And then two, from a financial services perspective, oftentimes regulated financial services institutions, at least today, are not able to validate public permissionless chains. Mm-hmm. And so that was another kind of motivating factor and feedback that we heard on several occasions that we really wanted to kind of address. And I think that will be kind of another big unlock as well.
Amazing. So I think that's great. Certainly a lot to consider around sort of the development of the blockchain, and certainly a lot to stay tuned and watch closely. Completely changing directions. So I think over the past couple of weeks, months, or whatever, we've seen a ton around memes, even the TIE, not to plug our meme coin dashboard, but like everybody's been sort of jumping on this bandwagon, including the Avalanche Foundation. And interestingly, you announced a culture coin or meme coin fund to foster community engagement and liquidity mining incentive program around this meme coin rush. So really, how do you think about meme coins? How important are they to the Avalanche community and sort of culture? Like, what's your take? I don't know, Ed, maybe we'll kick it off with you first.
Yeah, meme coins are really interesting and very fascinating, right? They're kind of like this direct pulse on not only your community, but like culture in general, right? And I think in the last NFT bull run, you saw this to a certain degree where people like whatever was the meta or things that were relevant to pop culture or things like that became really popular, would rise in price really quickly. And like meme coins are just like that times 10, times 100 in terms of like the feedback loop, in terms of how people invest and trade them and can kind of rotate into other, it's very liquid, right? If you remember, Dogecoin actually hit a peak of like a $90 billion market cap. So there's a lot of room to run on this stuff, right? And I think for us, the fund that you're talking about isn't a separate fund, but it actually is part of a larger initiative that we call the Culture Catalyst, right? We established that a couple of years ago to invest in community and culture and entertainment and just things that we felt were really interesting and that you could bring on chain. So this is kind of coming out of that overall fund. And yeah, I think when it came out, we were obviously very excited. The community was as well, but you had a few naysayers out there. But it's really interesting sometimes when this happens because a couple other chains have now fast followed, right? Announced their own versions that seem eerily similar to kind of the things that we've announced, or have taken inspiration, let's say, from that. So, it's really interesting. I think, like I said, the community is excited. Some really cool memes have been built on top of that. Obviously, some of them like leverage more than just your standard like token standard. We've seen some 404s that are also combined with meme coins, and people just like taking it and run with it. And I think that's obviously something that we're excited about, but at the same time, we're doing so many other things. So it's kind of like, how do you build this overall like portfolio or playground for people to do things on chain and have fun, right? And that's kind of like, in a nutshell, what our BD team does, because we aren't just a gaming chain. We're not just institutional. We're so many things. And yeah, so I think the whole team's excited about that. Morgan, anything else you want to
add? No, other than given the coins that were kind of launched on Avalanche, it was my own personal first foray into the meme coin community. And so I think like agree with everything that Ed said. And I think it's just kind of like another lever to engage and grow the Avalanche community and kind of bring others in who, are in this space for a variety of different reasons, right? Like this is not one industry or one vertical, right? It's a whole host of different kind of industries, communities, verticals. And so it's just kind of one of the many, particularly within like the culture, lifestyle, however you want to phrase it, worlds that has really kind of like drawn not only existing members, but new members into the community and allow them to kind of join the conversation and explore the other kind of offerings and applications on Avalanche. Again, this is not financial advice, but but definitely a way for them to like to engage.
Yeah, definitely fun to watch for sure. We'll have to see how long this continues, but interesting to see. Another area where you've been sort of growing out the community as well, and we talked about this briefly in the past, but you launched Codebase, which is your Web3 founder accelerator program. Can you bring us up to speed? Like, in a nutshell, what is the program? Talk to us about your cohort, who's enrolled in, like, what can we think about or see in terms of new projects coming to the market?
Yeah, so maybe just as a reminder, Codebase was a 12-week accelerator program that was started to really support pretty early stage Web3 startups and founders. I think the team got over 250 applications. And at this point, there was like an initial cohort that was accepted and announced relatively recently into the Codebase program. Again, just maybe as a reminder, all of the kind of companies in the program, they receive a stipend. They receive support from the Avalanche Foundation, as well as really Web2 or traditional companies that serve either as investors or advisors or mentors, as well as kind of proven Web3 builders in the space. And then ultimately kind of culminates in a chance to pitch for a grand prize as an investment that really culminates into a demo day. So the program did kick off recently. The teams that were selected, they had kind of like a kickoff session on site in Lisbon in late March. They collectively kind of developed a roadmap for their time in the program. Now they're all kind of back in their home countries or home locations, and at the same time have been attending like regular workshops on everything from customer discovery to best practices of storytelling, fundamentals of a good pitch, like all of these things that we as a BD team try to kind of work with and hone with our partner companies and crypto native startups, but really in like this like fast track program intensive way. And the goal is really to ensure that every company is prepared with like a narrative of why blockchain, because we ask that question a lot, specifically why and how Avalanche. We really think that kind of getting this down is essential to their product and kind of future roadmap and future success. And I think in terms of the teams that were selected, it's really broad-based in terms of different verticals, different industries, including like enterprise, entertainment, financial services, social fi and consumer-focused applications, and kind of everything in between. So I would say stay tuned. I'm sure there will be updates. The program, again, relatively recently launched formally, but This is just the first of several kind of cohorts to come. So I'm sure, Heidi, we will be talking about this in the next session as well.
Yeah, it'd be great. Maybe we can even have one of the founders participate on one of these calls going forward. But great to see the success there. I think 250 applications, I think, from all over the world. And yeah, I was looking at sort of the broad coverage of what's being built as part of this program. And so definitely look forward to seeing what comes of that. I'm sure there'll be some success stories. Ed, let's turn it back to you. There's been a lot happening on the gaming front, so I think this is pretty exciting. I know particularly around the MapleStory universe, just announced they'll be launching its own subnet. I know some of my colleagues were particularly excited about this and chatting about it, but tell us about MapleStory. Why would such a big brand want their intellectual property on their own blockchain?
Yeah, this is a deal that we're very excited about. I think internally, the conversation was a very long one. We got to know the team really well. They obviously announced that they were deploying on Polygon first, and then decided to kind of move over onto a subnet. But just by way of background, this is effectively a company incubated by Nexon. Nexon is the largest game studio in Korea. It's got, I think, around a $20 billion market cap today, and is kind of the market leader there. Their prized and core IP is this game called, MapleStory. It's been around for over 20 years. It's got almost 200 million registered users. There's multiple different versions out there, more in kind of a Web 2, like mobile PC type genre. You ask anybody who's a gamer, and they've either spent time with it or have friends who are, and so there's a lot of like nostalgia and good feels, and there's an economy in that game, right? And so when we think about potential good fits for Web3, a game like this makes a lot of sense, where you have millions of different characters and skins and items and soft currencies in that game, and I've been here for almost 2.5 years, and we spent a lot of time talking to both Web3 game studios, but also traditional Web2 game studios, right? And it's always exciting when a big name is kind of exploring the space. But one thing that we found with a lot of them is like, they didn't want to jump in the deep end with us. They wanted to kind of dip a little toe in the water and just like see if the water was warm, and like take some time and then put the ankle in there. And so what you saw a lot of times with these traditional publishers, maybe let's create some brand new IP that let's test and drop an NFT collection. Well, that's great. Like, we're happy to support that. But what really excited us about what the Nexon and the MapleStory Universe team was doing was they were actually taking this timeless prized IP and saying, look, we see the vision. Like, there's a really great use case for this, and we're going to go all in, right? So this company effectively raised $100 million from the parent company to spin out, and they're basically executing on that vision. So we spent a lot of time with that team, not only on the BD side, but like implementation, like their tokenomics team. At GDC was a great time to spend a lot of time face to face, and it's one of the teams and the games that we're most bullish about, and I can't wait for them to unveil more, because I think they're truly taking a really long tail view to it. So there's no get rich quick. There's no kind of pump and see where this goes. Like, they're really thinking about how does this last for another 20 years, if not longer. So we're like I said, we're really excited. I think can't wait for them to share more.
Excellent. I always considered like the financial services a long lead time. I figured gamers would be like much more faster, but it sounds like not in this case necessarily.
Games take a long time. Even I was surprised. I didn't know, Ed, like games, especially very high quality games, take like years to develop. And I know we'll talk about some, but I was surprised as well, Heidi.
Yeah. So let's talk about Gunzilla, the first crypto video game that is on the Xbox store. So sort of this like, how do you see the introduction of console games, affecting Web3 gaming, and how do you envision Web3 gaming sort of evolving over time? I know this has been a big conversation, particularly when we talk about gaming and blockchain.
Yeah, so Gunzilla is another team, the studio that we're very excited about. They've raised over $70 million all in. They're building their first game is kind of a AAA like battle royale first person shooter. It's got an exec team that has a long history in Web 2. they've been heads down building this game for 3 years, going back to like game development timelines. They've also got Neil Blomkamp, who is a award-winning director of like District 9, and Chappie as their chief visionary officer. So a lot of the cinematics are directed by him. So it's a rock star team, and we're really excited about that. I think the question that it unlocks is not necessarily what it does directly for Web3 gaming, but what it does, I think, for user acquisition for this game, right? So one of the biggest issues and one of the biggest questions that we always ask our games that we potentially want to bring on or like directly invest in or partner with is how do they think about user acquisition, right? And that's a really tough question to solve. And the fact that I think obviously the Xbox team and the PlayStation team know this is a Web3 game, but they kind of got the green light to go list in that store. Number one is pretty bullish for that team and their reputation. But also I think what it unlocks for bringing users into the fold, right? You don't necessarily need to hit them in the face with like NFTs or tokens right off the bat. If you just build a fun to play game, and then people can understand the value prop of what blockchain unlocks, which is at its core, basis, it's like, hey, you can earn something from just playing the game versus playing a Web2 game and you don't get anything. Also, being able to directly sell your assets and have liquidity on them, like that feels like a no-brainer for a lot of these gamers. So there's probably not going to be a ton, and I don't have insider info, but there's probably not going to be a ton of direct blockchain integration on these consoles, on this console side, but a ton of people do only play on consoles. So it's kind of their gateway into this. And if you can have cross-platform, there's a lot of really cool things that other battle royales like Apex and Fortnite have done as well.
Yeah, amazing. Like, what do you see in terms of trends, particularly as it comes to gaming and building out that vertical on Avalanche?
Yeah, I think for us with the subnet narrative, a lot of teams are wanting to go beyond just deploying a game, right? They look at it as an opportunity to build a platform and also publish other games, and you can't do that on every other chain. You can't, especially not on a monolithic chain, right? So they see the success of some of the other maybe subnets that have published games like the Beam subnet. I think what Shrapnel wants to do, what a lot of these teams are looking at, and then there's more utility to a token beyond just a singular game. So I think the platform play is really interesting. I think we're starting to see a lot of these games explore what they call like node sales, which is another area that we're kind of helping some of our game teams dive into. But really, the top focus for us is helping these games like finish out that blockchain integration, get to market, and help them with user acquisition.
And you kind of answered this a little bit, but let me ask a different way too. I mean, is there anything particular in terms of why game developers are choosing to build on Avalanche versus other blockchains? I mean, is it easier? Do you have the developer, kits or whatever that makes it more attractive?
Yeah, I think the first piece is kind of the appeal of like having your own sovereign chain, right? Being able to own that, and as a game developer, everyone thinks that their game is gonna bring millions of users on chain. And you just got to find the right infrastructure to be able to support that. Number one, the customizability around that. And then, of course, I think when you work with Avalanche and the team, the gaming BD team, you kind of work with the whole ecosystem, right? Similar to how any of the other verticals do this. So the devs the support team that helps you implement this are actual devs that work on the product. So it makes it a no-brainer. We obviously have things like Teleporter. We've got AvaCloud, which is like our one-click deployment for subnets, just like AWS. So all these things, once somebody actually gets into like the pipeline, it just makes it a no-brainer. And then of course we find that the closer a team is to actual deployment or launch or scaling, the more likely it is they end up going with Avalanche because it's battle tested. Like we know what the product can do. Points for games.
Yeah, I know you mentioned this, but I'd highlight it's the case for gaming companies, but also frankly, like financial services institutions or even like non-financial Fortune 500s and other types of enterprises. The fact that whether it's AvaCloud or Kaleido or Stardust can kind of come in and customize, build, manage, and maintain that subnet architecture for you, and you as a company instead can focus on building what your core business model is, the application, the whatever it is on top. That's something that I think has really resonated with our different partners, in that it just makes it really easy to kind of get to production as quickly and successfully as possible with your application, with your business, with your game, whatever it is, knowing that kind of that underlying blockchain infra standing up and maintenance is kind of taken care of, which is something that you shouldn't necessarily need to know how to do or have to hire a ton of resources for. So I think it's not only kind of buying into the infrastructure itself, but being able to kind of build on and create and manage that infrastructure is also something that I think has resonated with a lot of our partners.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think the onboarding piece, as you say, it can be very, very complicated and overwhelming, I think, coming into a blockchain. So the easier you can make it for your builders, the better. Just to close out sort of on the gaming side, last month there was the Game Developer Conference. So any like big announcements or key themes or anything that came out of that conference that you're like particularly excited about?
Yeah, I think our big announcement was just kind of the week before. It was the Nexon MapleStory announcement. During GDC, though, I think we made a lot of noise because we had this campaign that was kind of self-deprecating, but we called it like Web3 gaming sucks, right? I think the reason for that was a lot of developers and players have kind of made up their mind. Like either crypto is great, crypto is terrible. So it was a kind of a little play on that. And last year for us, it was showing maybe like sizzle reels or footage of what games could be, to be like, hey, there's actual games developing in the Web3 space. And then this year for us, it was like, these games are actually ready to play. So we had a bunch of them. We had different tournaments each day, and I think people had a lot of fun. We had some prime real estate on the show floor. And then I think one exciting announcement coming out of that, I think it was announced yesterday, is that Gunzilla, the game that we were just talking about, actually announced a pretty big partnership with OpenSea. So OpenSea is going to be actually integrating that subnet directly, right? So the first kind of app chain that they're going to be supporting, and going really big on the support, on the branding and the support there. So we're extremely excited about that, and think OpenSea is going to do a lot for that game.
Amazing. Morgan, let's bring you more fully into this conversation. So in February, we got an update on the Spruce initiative, where we saw Citi leverage Avalanche in a tokenization proof of concept alongside of like ABN AMRO and Wellington, Wisdom Tree, some others. Can you remind us, like, what is the Spruce environment, and tell us a little bit more about where this is all at?
I don't know. I liked hearing Ed talk about gaming more.
Okay, back to Ed for gaming.
No, so just as a reminder, Spruce is a testnet subnet that we deployed in, I guess it was now like a year ago. And it was effectively a permissioned environment for traditional buy and sell side institutions to basically come in and test out whatever it was that was top of mind for them from a blockchain-based use case or application perspective. As you can imagine, just from a topical perspective, asset tokenization is kind of front and center for a lot of these institutions. And so whether it's the tokenization of fiat via tokenized deposits or stable coins or wholesale CBDCs, all the way to the tokenization of alts and kind of everything in between, that's been something that a lot of our financial services partners have been interested in exploring. And so as it relates to this particular kind of POC and the 3 different use cases that were tested within it, to your point, there was a combination of buy and sell side participation. It was Citi as kind of the bank or the sell side participant, and then various clients of Citi, including ABN AMRO, Wellington, and Wisdom Tree, as well as kind of leveraging DTCC digital assets, which formerly is known as Securities. Through this proof of concept, the groups collectively kind of operationalized and tested 3 different use cases, including the instruction to tokenize a Wellington issued private equity fund that was kind of held at custody with Citi. In addition, the idea of transferring that private equity fund token from asset manager to asset manager, leveraging various kind kind of identity, KYC, accreditation standards. I know the teams leveraged Tokenies, token standard and capabilities around investor identification and kind of qualifications. And then finally tested with DTCC digital assets the idea of pledging that token as collateral to borrow against. And so those 3 different use cases were tested out. Citi published a short form report that is kind of publicly accessible. And so happy to share with you guys or the broader community if you're interested. And really like just taking a step back in terms of thinking, like, why are institutions looking at the tokenization of alts just in general? Because this is just one of the many kind of proofs of concepts and pilots and frankly in production use cases that exist kind of on chain today. A lot of institutions are focusing on the tokenization of alts because generally they are the least transparent and least standardized and most operationally intensive to administer, and therefore probably stand to benefit the most through an application of blockchain tokenization and smart contract technology and logic. And the idea would be, realizing efficiencies in terms of asset administration in the alt space, and then therefore being able to kind of, and I hate this word, democratize in terms of, enabling a broader group of investors, accredited investors, potentially retail, to have access to these assets with lower investment minimums. So that at a high level is the goal. And then in addition, really opening up greater utility to a lot of these assets, which historically and today or traditionally, investors in these assets today just don't have ready access to, such as being able to kind of borrow against them and use them as collateral. So at a high level, that kind of describes the POC, and there's a lot more to it. But we were really excited to work with all the teams in driving this forward and finally being able to talk about it publicly.
Nice. Tokenization, huge use case. Certainly we're going to see a lot more coming in this part of the ecosystem. So the Tokenization Asset Coalition, Tokenized Asset Coalition, I think this was formed last year, if I'm not mistaken. And Avalanche was just brought in as a new member alongside some others like Chainlink, Polygon, Solana, etc. What is the TAC? What's its mission? What role do you expect to play as being a new member?
Sure. So at a high level, I think the TAC is really trying to drive forward the industry from an adoption perspective as it relates to tokenization. And obviously adoption means different things depending on who you ask, but everything from like an institutional perspective, from an asset issuer to an asset purchaser owner perspective, as well as from a more kind of crypto native perspective and what that looks like. But it's the proliferation, adoption, utilization of tokenized assets obviously on Avalanche as well as on other chains. It's something from an Avalanche perspective we've been extremely focused on from the beginning, before the concept regained in popularity like 2 years ago. So it's really a collective effort across different blockchains, infrastructure providers, protocols to really kind of drive forward the industry and drive forward adoption through education and awareness initiatives, doing a lot of kind of thought leadership and education around the landscape today. What are the challenges? What do we need to drive forward as an industry to really kind of push forward this adoption curve? In addition, advocacy is a huge kind of component of the TAC overall, really ensuring that key regulators, not just in the US, but globally, are kind of aware of the industry efforts writ large, what that looks like, working with them, again, from an education perspective and conversation perspective, and really ensuring that they are brought along the journey, and that, whatever kind of regulation may or may not come out of our efforts, is kind of in lockstep with the industry overall. And then really an adoption component that ensures that collectively we as an industry, I think, work to identify what is the infrastructure that needs to be put in place, what is missing, what are the kind of the key integrations that need to happen, again, to really kind of jumpstart the adoption curve overall. So it's pretty broad based in terms of the membership, as well as kind of the the specific initiatives, but it's really with those three kind of pillars of education, advocacy, and adoption that I think informs a lot of the kind of actions and outputs and work product from the coalition overall.
Yeah, nice. And on the enterprise side, so Alipay, a payment platform established by Alibaba, and their Alipay Plus merchant platform is using the Avalanche subnet for Web3 enabled vouchers. Can you elaborate more on like what exactly they're doing, how they're planning on using Avalanche, sort of what's the greater vision with this collaboration?
Yeah, so I actually think like whether you're talking about Alipay Plus, or I know we'll talk about Coachella later, or even gaming or financial services institutions, like at a high level, I think all of these companies are looking at how to potentially leverage this tech to either address kind of real world pain points that they experience day to day, and or upgrade legacy infrastructure, or really drive forward new businesses and business models in their kind of day-to-day business. And I know Ed was saying earlier, like historically, or there still are companies that look at this tech as like a thing in a corner and like, maybe let's like launch an NFT and see what happens. But a lot of the companies that we work with are really looking to integrate fundamentally this tech with their roadmaps, with their business strategies, their strategic imperatives, and really leveraging it to kind of, again, upgrade their businesses. So there is like commonality, I think, in terms of like the way that a lot of them look at this tech. On the Alipay Plus side, so Alipay Plus is Alipay's merchant platform. They've set up a subnet using the AvaCloud offering, which we mentioned earlier, which is like the team and infrastructure that kind of comes in, creates, builds, and manages the subnet architecture for the client. So using a combination of AvaCloud as well as Alibaba Cloud to allow bubble tea merchants in the Philippines, Singapore, and Malaysia to offer coupons and vouchers for their customers to redeem when ordering. The vouchers are basically earned by playing like a mini game in their mobile wallet application. The subnet and platform are live today. And effectively, Alipay Plus is hoping to kind of productize this for all of their merchants on their platform to ultimately drive more sales, more revenue. But the first phase is really to kind of pilot this in those three markets to see if there's enough traction, what is the feedback, and kind of, again, looking to roll it out potentially more broadly.
And you had mentioned Coachella a second ago. That was a recent announcement that you have that collaboration, which is pretty exciting and interesting around this year's upcoming festival. So what does that entail? What does it look like? What was sort of the motivation by Coachella to engage with Avalanche?
Yeah, and here too, I've never been to Coachella, but I want to go at some point. And I don't know if you've been, or Heidi, if you've been.
I have not, but I've seen plenty of pictures.
I have been.
You have? Well, you should go and test this out. I'm sad.
Yeah, maybe we got to do a team trip or something.
We do have to do a team trip.
Can you invite the Thai with you?
Yes. But I think this is just another example of further customer or client engagement, and ultimately with the goal of not only leveraging that connectivity, but being able to engage and then obviously grow your product and service set with that growing customer set. But effectively at this year's Coachella Music Festival, those who are going will be able to effectively earn perks and tickets and other types of kind of upgrades by playing a game called Coachella Quests that was developed by the festival's innovation division. Basically attendees who complete the quests, live and at the event, as well as on the Coachella Discord server, will earn stamps, as well as points that can be traded for festival benefits, experiences, other types of perks, like access to certain VIP lounges or unreleased music. And so in this way, the organizers, obviously will bring greater utility, as we love to say in this industry, to their concert goers. But at the same time, I think through this, they'll be able to kind of gain insights into what their guests are doing during the event, during and throughout the event, throughout the, few days, and really being able to, again, engage and own more closely with their community. And so I think overall, this is just an example of all of the utility that we talk about, but I think really taking it to the next level in that you're tying in a real life event to this, right? And a real life event, real life experience where, blockchain is just in the background, right? It's not front and center, but it is the thing that enables this utility, this kind of engagement, this community that, again, we all talk about, but it's exciting to kind of see it operationalized.
Yeah, interesting. And I think that's the way people think of the blockchain going forward too, though it will be in the background and not front and center, but
I hope so. It's like, it's so funny. Like people ask, or sometimes like in these webinars, people ask, they're like, how would you explain blockchain to your mom? And I'm like, I wouldn't, because she doesn't need to know. Like, she doesn't need to know how.
I'd probably introduce mine to meme coins first.
Okay, note to self, I will not ask that question on a future webinar.
But it's true, right? Like you don't need to know how like the email protocol works.
Right.
You just need to know how to operate the email or the email app or whatever it is. So I really hope that at some point, in the near future, we really start focusing on like the application part of things and why it's cool or why it's a value add or why someone will want to use it. And I don't know, Ed, maybe that means that we'll be like out of a job, but I feel like that will be a sign of success for the industry overall.
Great. So just as a way to expand Avalab's reach and awareness of Avalanche, the foundation launched the Ambassador DAO. Can you talk about what this DAO is? What are the benefits in joining? How can one get involved?
Yeah, so I think this is a very exciting initiative because we are very lucky because we have an ecosystem and a community that really cares. Obviously, they create a ton of really great content, and they are great ambassadors for us, right? And so they've been doing this organically ever since Avalanche, even like the white paper was released, right? And so I think this is a great opportunity to help. We saw it as the community team to also just multiply itself in a way where we can kind of structure this DAO where it's self-governing. So who better than to determine the direction of kind of the ecosystem and the ambassadors and those that are kind of the biggest supporters and loyalists. So I think it's also a really cool opportunity to for people to kind of gain some of these interesting skills and be able to take on like leadership roles in Web3 if they want to eventually work full time in this space. So it's kind of a great way to test the waters and be more active and take a more elevated role in the ecosystem. And then in terms of the benefits, I think there's different kind of tiers that you rank up, if you will, in the DAO. And that's like, everything from like swag to opportunities to speak at events, the ability to go to different events, and a bunch of other different benefits as well. So I think the first round of the acceptances of the DAO have come out, and a lot of names that I personally recognize, a lot that I don't either. And so it's just also a really cool way for us to interact more with community and see who's been recognized and be able to see a lot of these really great initiatives come forth.
Do we know if the Nokia phone is included in the swag?
Ooh, that might be like the secret top tier, but I don't even have one. So
Avalanche branded Nokia phone.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. So many different use cases. I am super excited. Like, it's not just one narrative, but it's really just so much happening. So I don't know if there's like one thing that you want to leave all our viewers with, what would that be?
And you want to kick it off?
Sure. There is so much going on in this ecosystem. That's the first thing I would say. And so if you're interested about Avalanche, you can message me or Morgan. We'd love to get you started. There's so many great things that are happening, even more exciting announcements to come. So please stay tuned. And we'd love to meet you and introduce you to our ecosystem.
I think just to echo that, there is a lot going on, and it's something, it's obviously our jobs to kind of keep up to date with what's going on. And we realize that our partners, whether they're institutions or individual community members and anything in between, potentially they're looking at our ecosystem and like 10 others. And so to that end, we created this report called the Snow Report that every month comes out at the end of the month and really kind of recaps across different verticals. What were all the developments? What were all the announcements from across different verticals and from a platform perspective? So I definitely recommend kind of following along with that. And then to Ed's point, obviously we are happy to and do engage with community members kind of all day, every day. And so happy to kind of take those conversations forward. But, you know, I'm very excited about all, frankly, not just the institutional kind of components, but even gaming and DeFi and consumer DePIN. Like there's so many things that we also didn't even talk about. But really to kind of start seeing the use and leverage of Teleporter. This is something that, again, like kind of bringing it back to the beginning, it's something that we've always talked about, but it will be really cool to kind of start pointing to really concrete use cases and examples of what we mean and have always been talking about and always been referring to, but actually demonstrating it in practice is something that I'm really looking forward to.
Amazing. In addition to the Snow Report, I encourage all of our viewers also to check out Frosty Metrics, which is where you can find all the stats on Avalanche across verticals, NFTs, gaming, DeFi. And we have a very exciting announcement coming out soon where there's going to be a new interactive feature on Frosty Metrics that everyone will want to check out for sure. So stay tuned, watch our socials, that's coming. Morgan, Ed, thank you so much. What an amazing conversation. Congratulations on Teleporter, the Durango upgrade, and just all these relationships that you are bringing into the Avalanche ecosystem. Continued success to you both, and looking forward to doing this again next quarter.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. Had a blast.
Awesome.